All right. Welcome, everybody. Pleasure to have you guys here. My name is Andrew David. This is a high performance call with Blake Newbar's team. Appreciate you guys being on. As always, Monday through Friday, noon Eastern time live. Occasionally here on, you'll be able to see it on the YouTube channel if you want to catch the replays there. We'll post that link via. If you got the link for the YouTube channel, you can drop that into the chat. But I want to welcome you guys aboard, and I'm excited for today. I've got a good friend of mine that's coming on. Let's go ahead and I'm going to pin a couple of these here. Where'd he go? There he is. All right. So I want to print or pin both. Where am I? Why can't I pin myself too? Pin, not replace, add pin. There we go. All right. I finally figured this technology stuff out. So my friend here, Chris Lange, I have known Chris going on, 25 years? I think we're at 25, 26 years. It's been quite a long time. Chris and I were goofy high schoolers. We started out, decided to run track along with Chris and a couple of friends because I wanted to get some sun and meet some girls. And Chris was instrumental in that, helping fitness become an even bigger part of my life than it already was. We created a friendship that's now lasted, several decades. And he is a young man that has pushed me to do better in many, many things. He became one of my dearest and closest friends, and one of those few relationships that you start at a young age that you're able to actually maintain. Even though we now live across the country, we don't get to see or talk to each other as much as we would like. We've been able to maintain that. Now, some of the cool things about Chris, besides the fact that as a teenager, I think he could do 150 pull-ups or something, some crazy amount. He was made up of about 60% of his body mass was his lats, his back muscles. We always gave him a hard time about that. But Chris is a highly intelligent guy. He spent a lot of years learning everything you can think of about health, about wellness on a myriad of different levels. He's been everything from a strongman competitor to a fitness model to a near state champion track meet and everything else that you can think of in between. But I'll let him talk a little bit about what he's done. But I wanted to bring him on to talk a little bit about health as entrepreneurs, what we can do to bring some balance to that, to live healthier lives, to just enjoy our highest selves a little bit more. It's something that I think kind of suffers a bit, especially over this last year. So on that note, welcome, Chris, to our high performance call.
Hey, thanks, Drew. Can I just say how much I appreciate you calling me a young man? So I'm in my 40s, and when I hear someone calling me a young man, that really makes me feel good on a Thursday morning.
But I mean, I knew you when you were, when we were this big, so it's okay. Yeah. So Chris and I could probably spend hours sitting and chatting. And actually, Chris I mentioned, when I left Arizona and moved to Florida, Chris was instrumental. He was there that summer. We drove across the United States in I-10. We just drove nonstop listening to Mambo No. 5 and like one other song almost the entire way, driving all the way across the United States, just listening to that, the two of us in a little hatchback the whole trip. So
I know. Times. And it was, so here's something to know about Drew. So Drew's talking a little bit about my background when we were in high school. But Drew was so obsessed back in the day. He still loves health and fitness, but Drew was so obsessed in the day. Anything that anybody said was going to help him increase muscle mass, if it was legal, he was going to do it. So if someone said eating black ants or going and eating this flour was going to increase your muscle size, he was doing it. And literally like sometimes gagging over whatever it was that someone was saying was going to try to help him increase his muscle mass. So yeah, Drew and I were first introduced to health and fitness primarily in a very fanatical way of we were wanting to do anything to increase muscle size as teenagers.
Yeah, anything and everything. And we would joke about that. If they had come out with an article that said, hey, the protein found in dog food is of a higher quality and you get more amino acids from it, we probably would have tried it. We've eaten some interesting things. But that's also, I think that was kind of the genesis of learning what really works and why, certain supplementation or other things with the body is important. So guys, what I wanted to do, we're going to talk about certain things. If you've got questions about health, now again, neither of us are doctors. So if you're in a state where you need, professional medical advice, by all means, see someone with the proper degree. We are going to share those from some experience. And Chris has legitimately thousands of hours of research and training and other things in a lot of these fields. So, I'm more than comfortable referring to him as an expert on some of the things that we're going to be speaking on. With that said, we'll dive in. But if you guys have some questions. So one of the things I want to talk about, Chris, you and I have talked a lot about, and I've mentioned to these guys that I used to do some nutritional microscopy, like the certified, live blood analysis. And that really came about because of you. And that was something you were doing, looking at health on a cellular level and taking things like that. But really, you've kind of created and looked at over the years, you've developed kind of these 5 or 6 pillars for health, right? And things that are important. So why don't we kind of hit on what those are, and we can talk about them for a little bit.
Yeah, no, thanks, Drew. And so guys, let me back up just a little bit before I dive into that, because what I want to help you understand is what got me motivated to start looking at health on a cellular level. So as Drew mentioned, I grew up in this space for several years where my sole focus was just fitness, was building muscle. And as Drew said, I was able to compete in bodybuilding competitions when I was younger, and strongman competitions and powerlifting competitions. And that's all I cared about, was how strong my muscles were and how I could perform on a fitness level. So I knew a ton about how to bodybuild and how to, increase your ability to run a mile faster and to increase your performance athletically. And I knew a lot of the nutritional side from that. However, something changed so dramatic in my life, at least for me, that caused an instant switch on how I approached health. And that was actually I sat there and watched my mom, and I want to be sensitive to this because so many of us have either been there or are there now or will be there. But whenever you lose a loved one to cancer, it changes things. So I sat there and watched my mom die from pancreatic cancer. When I say I watched her, literally, I was at her bedside watching her this whole time until eventually she took her last breath. And there's something about that experience really changed my approach to health, because I wanted to not only understand how your body could perform athletically or on a fitness level, but I wanted to understand, how do you help strengthen your whole body on a cellular level? Because that's where everything starts. So think about it this way. Your body is literally made up of 32 trillion cells. 32 trillion is a huge number, okay? And so every single tissue, your skin, your hair, your joints, your bones, your muscles, everything is a little tiny cell, just one little cell that's multiplied billions and billions of times to make an eye, to make a muscle, to make your skin. And so when we think about our bodies this way, we have to realize that everything that we put into our body, everything we do, even everything we think, affects that one little tiny cell multiplied into 32 trillion. Okay, so everything we do affects this cell. So what I wanted to understand is, how does that cell become healthy? So one of my favorite persons is a gentleman named Seth Godin. I love Seth Godin. If any of you have ever listened to his podcast or his books, and Seth Godin always has this concept about start with the one. You change the one, that can then change the second to the third, but you start by learning how to change that one. So what I want to understand is, how do you change that first one cell? How do you change that one cell that then can help change the other cell to the other cell? And then we're looking at, how do we change 32 cells of our body to be healthy? Because man, if we can create cell health, everything in our lives, particularly from a physical level, comes together in a way to where we have more energy, more strength, more performance. We sleep better, we think better, we perform better, everything. And so that's what I wanted to try to understand. So when Drew's talking about this nutritional microscopy, I started doing all this research on, okay, how does somebody understand a cell? So I had taken cellular and molecular biology classes in college, but what I started doing is I started staring under a microscope and learning how to analyze cell performance under a microscope. So we bought all this really advanced equipment. We're talking about like $10,000 to $12,000 microscopes, and we sat there and analyzed, what do cells do? How do they grow? How do they become nutritious? How do they become performing? How does our cells develop in a way that allows us health? Okay, and so after years and years of research, so I looked at cells under a microscope for years. I mean, thousands of people's cells, tons all across the country, all types of people, all walks of life, big people, little people, male, female, you name it. And every single cell responded the same way to specific things. Okay? So I want to make sure you understand that foundation is every one of our cells responds specifically, all the same, with these 5 pillars that we're going to talk about. So there's 5 specific things that we say, hey, if these 5 things you can do, it makes a humongous difference on your cells. So again, it doesn't matter where you're at. You can be the healthiest person in the world, or you can be the most unhealthiest person in the world. If you start doing these things, it starts creating cell health. And cell health is what...
So before we dive into the cell health, Chris, I'm going to cut you off. Is everybody still here? Are we paying attention? Like, do these 5 things now sound interesting enough? Kind of hearing a little bit more about Chris's background and knowing that he's been looking at blood over and over and over, thousands of people. And that's kind of how I did it. I got to look at maybe a few hundred. Chris had been doing this for years all over the country, right? So the things that we're about to talk about are elements that will help you, day to day, but we're going to talk about why it works on that microscopic, that cellular level, and then how it affects your overall health. Okay, good. So we do have some people still awake. That's fantastic. All right, Chris. So 5 pillars, and what do we have?
And keep in mind, guys, this isn't something that I just came up with myself. Like, this is years of research with medical professionals, cellular biologists. This wasn't just like, oh, I think this works. This was years of research collaborating with, I actually worked with medical universities that taught medical school, different professors. And so it wasn't just like, hey, I think this was something that evolved through a ton of research, okay? So here's the first one, the very first pillar, and this is the most important one that we have seen that affects your cell health, that ultimately affects 32 trillion cells, is your oxygen levels within your cells. Your body's ability to oxygenate itself. So think about this. The only thing that we can only go a couple minutes without in our whole life is oxygen. You can go days without nutrients. You can go days without water. You can go days without, you think about anything that you really like to do, okay? But there's only one thing that if you go minutes without, you're gone. And that's oxygen, okay? Oxygen is what gives our cells energy to do what it needs to do. So our body takes that oxygen, okay? So when we breathe in, we take a deep breath. Oxygen enters into our lungs, and our lungs takes that gas and pushes it into our cells in a form called hemoglobin. And then all our blood cells all that blood going through our body, it transports that oxygen to every single cell of our body, okay? That's how we get that. So if we know that our cells need a ton of oxygen, without going into a 3-hour dissertation on how we do that, here's a couple things that we've determined that makes a huge difference with how your body oxygenates itself. And again, these aren't going to be groundbreaking things that you're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, I've never heard that, okay? The first one is hydrating. Drinking water, all right? Now, that might be some novel thing. I've never heard of that. No, most of us have heard of that.
So how does hydration help with oxygenation? How does adding water help my body breathe essentially better?
Yeah. So think about this, okay? Your body's ability to oxygenate itself. So most people can breathe. We're breathing, I can breathe fast, I can breathe quick, I can breathe slow. But how does your body transfer that to the cells? You have to have good circulation. Your blood has to be circulating. The more your blood circulates, the more oxygen you're going to get to your cells. So there's 3 really big things that allow better circulation. Number 1 is hydration. Our blood is composed of a lot of water. So when we can hydrate ourselves and there's more water in our blood, we're actually, in our body that our body uses, we can circulate blood faster. So the first thing is water, guys. If you're not drinking enough water, start drinking more water. Just that alone can help dramatically. And the rule that I like to use is half your body weight in ounces. So no matter whatever your weight is, say I'm going to drink half of my body weight in ounces each day. Okay? That's step number 1 is increase your hydration. You're going to increase your body's ability to circulate blood. Okay? The second is just moving around and being active. One of the things that's hard as an entrepreneur, so I've been an entrepreneur for years, and I went from really always out and about doing stuff that I've had to spend a lot of time at my desk, at a computer, and our bodies don't move as much. So what I've had to do is I've had to consciously think, And sometimes I'll even set timers on my phone. I'll set a little alarm that every hour just beeps that I know, hey, I just need to get up, walk around real quick, take some breaths, but just being active. So I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about some intense fitness program. All I'm suggesting is for right now, the most important thing that you can start doing is just maintaining some level of activity throughout the day, frequently, whether you're walking for a little bit, getting up and moving around. But the more you do that, it allows your blood to circulate. Okay, so water, activity a little bit, get moving, that creates higher levels of circulation. Now the third, which is really important, is involving, so your blood will do specific things based off of the acidity level of your body. So acidity, we have this scale where our body becomes alkaline or acidic. We want it to be balanced. Most of the foods, the stress we feel, and I probably don't need to be talking about stress because as entrepreneurs, you don't ever experience stress. So we probably don't need to be talking about that.
Nobody on here has ever experienced stress. Everybody's totally just zen all of the time, right? We're good.
If you do experience stress, okay, if you do, then you have to understand that that has a weight on my body that creates a high level of acidity, okay? So just what we think in our stress level creates high acidity. Okay, so how do we lower our level of acidity?
Here,
okay?
Chris, real quick, I found these. So we were talking about hydration, right? And these are just from Google, and sorry guys, I should have prepared these a little bit better. But when we're talking first about hydration, then we'll jump to the acidity one. I've got another slide that kind of shows some of this. When we're looking at it, Chris, what's this? Yeah. These are, everybody knows our cells are like, our red blood cells are kind of like donuts, right? But the donuts without the holes, ideally, is kind of what we're looking for, right? Everybody kind of know that. They're kind of like little pancakes going through. So when they're like this and dehydrated, what's going on here, Chris?
So this is called, what you're seeing on the left, that's a state called Rouleau or erythrocyte aggregation. And that's where your red blood cells start clumping together. Okay, and we don't want our red blood cells to clump together like that. Okay, we want them to look like the right side. So think about this. A red blood cell is very small, an individual red blood cell, but when it goes into what's called a capillary tube is the smallest blood vessel we have. And one red blood cell can fit in single file one at a time into a capillary tube. And what happens in a capillary tube is that's where our cells deliver its oxygen. That's where the red blood cells dump off its oxygen to all the rest of our cells of our body. And so when think about a funnel, if you're trying to pour something into a funnel and only one of these little red blood cells can enter at a time, but if your blood looks like this to the left, a bottleneck that takes place because your body has a hard time pushing into a capillary tube, and so it slows down circulation. And so what affects that to the left is hydration, acidity, okay, and then just making sure your body's active. What were you going to ask, Drew?
So what I was going to say, guys, is this is where sometimes those headaches that you get if you're dehydrated, and you may not even recognize that that's what it's from. It's because your blood is trying to push these cells through. It's trying to force it through because that oxygen is the only thing. That's what your brain needs, and that's what your body needs in order to function. Cellular health, and there's all of these other things we could talk about, as part of this. But if I'm not hydrated, I'm not getting oxygen where I need it to be. So we want to be hydrated. So this is another one I have, Chris, and it's kind of what you were talking about with being acidic and dehydrated, and then some other issues, right?
Yeah, and so again, this is just a closer up image. You want your red blood cells to be full of oxygen. So on the left, you see individual red blood cells. They look nice and dark. They're full of oxygen. That's what we want. That's oxygenated blood right there. The thing on the right, if you notice, they look very different. And that's because they're so thin in the middle. Okay, this is what's called a codocyte. And so a codocyte is where you literally don't have enough oxygen within that particular cell. And that people, anemia is one of them that they'll call it, where your red blood cells aren't carrying enough oxygen. And so if you have a ton of those, then, you're diagnosed with anemia usually. So instead of going into so much detail about this, one of the things that you can understand, guys, is that number one is we want to oxygenate our cells. Number two is we want to make sure that they're circulating. So the three things, again, to help create better oxygen and circulation in our cells is low acidity levels, more hydration, okay, and then moving around a little bit. As we exercise and move around, and as our heart is able to pump a little bit faster here and there throughout the day, it creates a higher circulation. That's our heart's our pump. It's what pumps our blood through. So those three things can make a huge difference, okay? Those three things can make a huge difference. So again, we could spend all day talking about oxygenation, but let's move on to the next one, okay? The next one is nutrients. So making sure our body gets specific nutrients. Now, our body needs about 90 different nutrients a day. That's between things like vitamins and minerals and different phytonutrients and essential fatty acids. So our body needs specific nutrients because our cells can't operate without it. So here's an example. If most people ask, or most people understand that your bones need a lot of this particular mineral, then most people would say, oh, calcium. Okay, that's because bone cells need a ton of this mineral called calcium to create a process that helps to build stronger bones. Without the calcium, our bones don't have the right minerals to be able to actually build a stronger bones. And there's a lot of things bone cells need. But your eye cells, my eyes, they don't need as much calcium. My skin cells need a lot more other specific nutrients. Okay, just like my hair needs specific nutrients. So every nutrient that your body takes has a specific job that does a specific thing on a cellular level. So what happens when we stop getting those nutrients for the right amounts? Our cells can't perform. That's like if your car, you need the right amount of oil, you need certain types of fluids in your car, you need gas in your car. So if we're going to kind of create this analogy, if you stop putting oil in your car, or if you stop putting, if your battery ran low of the water within the battery, or if all of a sudden you didn't have any more antifreeze and you were in cold weather, it devastates the car. A lot of problems happen. So our bodies are the same way. So our bodies have to have a mix of nutrients, okay? And that's why it's always encouraged that we have a well-balanced diet where we're eating things like vegetables and fruits. And there's a million diets out there, guys. All I'll say, because of the time that we have right now, is try to eat a variety of foods. A variety. If we're eating fast food, In-N-Out and McDonald's every day, that's not a variety. Is it okay to eat McDonald's sometimes? Absolutely. I love myself some spicy chicken nuggets now and again. Okay? But if I ate that every single day, and I ate the same thing for breakfast and dinner every single day, I would be limiting the variety of the different nutrients my body's getting. And so just making sure you have variety in your foods, from vegetables and fruits and different grains and, some meats, like all these things balance out to make sure we're getting a good balanced diet. And then obviously taking supplementation can help with that, because
let's talk about that for a second, Chris, supplementation, because this is something, you and I, obviously with the background in years and years and years, we've tried a lot of supplements on the market. And some people are very much in favor of, some people are very much against, right? And think, oh, I don't need that. I'm going to get everything I need just from food. What I learned was that it didn't always work like that, even though, especially when I first started to get introduced to live blood analysis and we were looking at things like that, at the time, my diet was pretty good. I was eating fairly healthy. And I got in there, what everyone tells you that healthy is. And I went in and I looked and we went, oh, I'm missing all of these essential nutrients. There's something I'm not getting enough of, even though the labels tell me I should be, right? So not to promote any particular supplements here, guys, not to talk about any specific diet, because all of us are a little bit different, but can supplementation help? Are you against it or for it? And again, this is our opinion, but
here's one of the things that we learn is, obviously that's the foundation. The foundation is start eating a well-balanced variety of things in your diet, preferably a little bit of vegetables and fruits to start off with. If you're not, that's kind of the start. But you'll notice as you get into that, you can be eating really healthy. However, the food quality today just isn't necessarily what it used to be 60, 70 years ago. We're missing certain minerals, certain vitamins, certain phytonutrients within our foods. And I know that sucks, guys, but that's just is what it is, okay? Our food is not as nutritious as it used to be. And so supplementation, I'm a big proponent of it. And one of the reasons why, for the first time, not only did I obviously notice how I felt when I took supplements, but for the first time, as I started studying cells, I saw how healthy healthier. It made people's cells when they started taking specific nutrients. And a big one, you hear a lot about B vitamins. So I'll just talk a little bit about one specific nutrient that affects the development of your cells a lot that we see under the microscope, that what actually affects it is if your body's not getting the right amount of B vitamins, okay, B vitamins help not only your body produce natural energy, but one of the reasons why is it helps your cells develop. And we're talking 32 trillion cells here. So if you're missing B vitamins, B12 is one of the biggest ones, B6, there's the B family of vitamins, that B vitamins can dramatically help the development of our cells. Okay, and again, we can talk a ton about nutrients and specific things that are out there, but if your body's missing Bs, it really affects the development of your cells. And that's why so many of us also have low energy levels, is low B levels. And here's something else that lowers B levels, stress. Now I keep mentioning that. I know I don't have to because I know none of you guys are stressed out there, but every time you're stressed, it creates a chemical reaction that depletes your B levels. Guess what? It depletes your zinc levels. And so again, we won't talk about all these 90 nutrients, but just know that our bodies need specific nutrients to make sure our cells are getting what they need. Okay? Yeah. So the kind of takeaways, Drew, if I could just say 2 takeaways, it would be starting with a good balanced diet, nutrition, variety of foods, and then if you can have the opportunity, try to start taking some good supplements, just some supplementation that can help getting some missing nutrients that maybe our bodies isn't getting enough of.
Yeah. It's one of those, again, oxygenation is something we could do and we have done, and Chris has done hours on, and nutrition, nutrients could be the same type of thing, but we want amino acids. So again, Patricia, there's a lot of these that are necessary for different people. And everyone needs them a little bit differently. And that's one of the key things, just like when we talk about success and we talk about training and we talk about reading and we talk about support, all of these things, we are all a little bit different. See, the government everywhere in the world has stepped forward and tried to provide standards, but standards don't apply to every single person, right? I learned, every single time that I gave blood, I had enough iron, right? They were like, you're good. You're within our standards to be able to give blood. You're fine. When we went in and we examined, look, my iron was low, my vitamin B12 was low, all of these different things. I was dehydrated where I was following standards. So there are things that are necessary for every individual person. And then, we've had a couple people talk about, and Chris mentioned, there's a lot of different diets, whether we're talking keto or the other extreme, you have vegan. Everybody with it and everywhere in between, you guys have different things that will help you, right? I remember doing blood work for somebody that was a vegan, was saying, oh, I'm good with this and this and this. And we got in and found out that the protein inside their blood, the protein that they were getting from vegetables and a couple of other things, they weren't digesting well. So the nutrients they thought they were getting, their body wasn't actually being able to benefit from. So we're all different. The key is we're talking about some basic things. And, there's other ways. And maybe if you guys are really interested, Chris and I have talked about putting together kind of a higher level health training that we might put together for you if it really becomes interesting. And we'll talk about that more later. But I want to try and get through some more of these pillars, guys.
So you kind of created a nice segue there. So the next pillar, so first one, remember, oxygen. Second one is nutrients, making sure our cells get oxygen, the right amount of nutrients. The third one, let's talk a little bit about what we call enzymes. So Drew mentioned digestion, okay? We have to be able to make sure that we're able to digest the things that we're consuming, okay? So we can eat all this food. We can even eat healthy food. We can eat bad food. However, if we're not metabolizing it and digesting it effectively, first off, we're not getting the right amount of nutrients from that food. And the other thing is many people today, I'm sure a lot of people on this call, we all suffer from it at times, are major digestional issues. And it's something that no one likes to talk about. We don't like to talk about our bowel movements and what they look like and how often they are. But it's the reality of life. That's part of being us, is we have digestion. And our digestional tracts have to be healthy. And so there's something that can dramatically help our digestional tract. One of the things that I consider a foundational pillar here, and this is enzymes. So let's talk a little about what enzymes do. So your body produces them naturally, okay? When we start eating our food and chewing, our mouth literally starts producing enzymes in our mouth that starts metabolizing these foods. So enzymes act as the same thing as what fire would do when you burn something. So I could take a piece of wood, so here's an analogy, and I can chop that piece of wood up as much as I want with an axe. I can put it in a blender and make it sawdust. Guess what? It's still small pieces of wood. When I burn it and put it under fire, it's no longer wood. It literally changes the chemical component of how it's made, and it's not wood anymore. Enzymes do that exact same thing to our food. We can't just be eating food that just passes through our system and X's it out. We have to metabolize and pull the nutrients from those foods. Enzymes do that. That's what enzymes do, okay? They act as the fire that breaks it down on a chemical level to pull out vitamin A, vitamin B, my zinc, my fiber, my this, my this. That's what enzymes do. Okay, so now that we know that, how does our body get enzymes? We already talked about how our body produces them. We produce them in our mouth. We produce a lot of them in our pancreas. As we get older, our body stops making as much enzymes. That's why when we get older, because when we were little, most of us are like, man, I could eat anything. And no matter what I did, I didn't have a tummy ache, and I could, I never gained weight, or whatever the case was. And that's because most of the time when we're younger, our body produces enough enzymes to metabolize our foods effectively. As we get older,
our body stops producing as many enzymes. When does that start to take place?
Typically between like around the ages of 25 is when our body starts slowing down. And then it gets worse. Our body just stops making as much enzymes. So into our 30s, a little bit less. Into our 40s, way less. Into our 50s, way less. That's why so much as we get older, we start having so many more digestional problems. It's not just a byproduct of age that just magically, we have digestive problems now because we're older. It's because our body has stopped producing the right amount of enzymes. And so now when we eat, we're having acid reflux, and we're getting tummy aches, and we're getting headaches, and we feel lethargic, and we're getting diarrhea, and all this stuff's happening. We're thinking, man, I used to be able to eat this, no problem. As we get older, our body stops producing enzymes. So there's a couple things that escalate all that. Number one, the more cooked foods we eat, processed foods we eat, the more our enzymes have to try to produce to break all that stuff down. So if we're only eating cooked foods all the time, and we're not eating raw live foods that contain enzymes, which we'll talk about more in a second, if we're always eating processed foods, it takes a ton more enzymes for our body to start to try to break that down, okay? And so if we're always producing a ton of enzymes because our bodies are never eating anything with actual live enzymes in it, eventually it wears down. And our body gets sick of producing all these enzymes, and the system starts shutting down a little bit that are producing the enzymes. So here's the remedy. Here's what's suggested, what research will show, is if we're having these problems, there's two things we can do. Number one is we can eat more raw food. So a raw food, when I say a raw food, like a tomato, if you just take a tomato and eat it, it has live enzymes in it. So it already has enzymes to break down itself. And so it helps us metabolize that. When we cook that tomato, sure, it tastes yummy, but when we cook that tomato, it kills the live enzyme. There's no enzymes in that tomato anymore if we cook it over 120 degrees. 160 degrees. It's dead. Same thing with any food we cook. If it's cooked over that a certain temperature, we're killing the enzyme. So now our body has to produce more enzymes to try to break it down. So if we can eat more raw foods, okay, the more raw foods we eat, the more enzymes they contain. Certain foods have a lot of these enzymes. Papaya is one of them. Papaya is an amazing fruit with a ton of enzymes. Pineapple has a ton of enzymes. Red grapes, avocados. These are specific foods that have a ton of enzymes. So when you eat these foods with other foods, it actually can help your body better metabolize the foods that you're eating. So one example is if you're lactose intolerant, there's actually you're missing the enzyme, okay, called lactase to break down lactose. Lactose is a sugar within dairy. And if you eat dairy and you're like, oh my gosh, man, I feel awful, I get digestion problems, lactose intolerance is because your body stopped making the lactase enzyme. So if you don't make lactase enzyme to break down your dairy sugars, you're lactose intolerant. When someone becomes gluten intolerant, it's because your body's missing the enzymes to break down gluten, to break down certain grains. If you don't have that enzyme, then when your body takes it in, it doesn't know what to do with it because it's missing the key enzyme to break it down. So we have to sometimes help our bodies produce and have good amounts of enzymes so that we can better digest our food. And so
guys, so here's the thing. So we'll roll into the next one. Listen, Hartley, if if this isn't speaking to you, if you decide this isn't for you, that's okay, my man. We understand that not every training is going to resonate with every single person. And so if you don't like it, hey, come back tomorrow. We'll have some other stuff for you. That's totally okay. With that in mind, there are some that are getting a little bit of value out of it. So that's okay. We're going to keep going. We got a couple other of the pillars that I want to make sure that we cover for you guys as we get wrapped up with this. Now, before we get into that, and maybe what we need to talk about, good. We got a bunch of, I love this. So good. Thank you. This is awesome. Good. So here's a question, guys, and why all of this is important. I know Chris has spent years doing it. We've got doctors on here. We have personal trainers on here. We have others that are serious about nutrition and everything. I want to jump ahead because we've talked about oxygenation, nutrients, enzymes. We've got a couple more, but I want to jump to, one of, so I realize that when I eat dairy, sugar foods, I get more spots. Yeah. So part of that could be enzymes. Yeah. You're just not, your body doesn't have it. So like I learned through a number of different, categories that I didn't process certain fats real well. And so I needed help there. Right. So there are enzymes that can help with that. Right. It's all about understanding, again, self-awareness, not just mentally, emotionally, but your body. It can do great things for you. So looking at that, Chris, there's an element to this. There's one of the nutrients or one of the pillars that you and I were talking about, especially as entrepreneurs, that's not necessarily this food that I'm ingesting. It's another element. So what's that? Talk to me a little bit about balance.
Yeah. So let me give a little bit of context to with what Drew's talking about. We'll segue into it. So first off, most everyone here wants to eat healthy. They want to eat healthy. They want to be at the right weight that they want to. They want to have good energy levels. But it's like, why don't I have the motivation and ability just to do it? Me personally, I can have a bad day and I want to open up a gallon of ice cream when all my kids are in bed and I want to sit in front of Netflix or sit in front of something and just veg for 3 to 4 hours, letting my mind numb while I'm eating a huge thing of ice cream. Is that good for me? Absolutely not. But something has happened that wants me to do that. And so one of the things that we've discovered is that when our lives are more balanced, because there's a huge proponent of us, okay? We're people that we're physical, we're emotional, we're spiritual. We have all these different dynamics to who we are. And we've seen that when your life is out of balance, when our mind isn't balanced, when our heart isn't balanced, when all these things aren't balanced in our life, when there's no balance, it throws things off in a way that we look for coping mechanisms to try to create this sensation to numb those feelings or to numb the pain and all of us have these coping mechanisms. And food and nutrition has become such a major coping mechanism that people turn to. And so we look to these comfort foods because they affect us chemically. They actually have a drug-like process that produces addictive things, chemicals in our brain. So the sugary foods, the fatty foods, and most people crave them mainly at night. And there's a lot of reasons why that is. So balance is so crucial. And so what I mean by that is I know if I'm going through a day where I'm so stressed and all I'm doing is I'm sitting in front of my computer on calls, doing stuff, and my whole day, 95% of my day was just work. Okay, and that's what's hard because as an entrepreneur, we got to grind, we got to get it done, we got to do it. But if 95% of my whole day
there's obsessive behaviors with being an entrepreneur.
No.
None of us here have any of those problems. Nobody here is pushing themselves too hard. It's all about we're all totally balanced out.
So it's something that when we're doing that, okay, 95% of our day is all work, or 95% of our day is one thing. Our bodies, our whole minds, our beings aren't made for that. We have to have the balance. So for me, I know when I can, let's say I draw some lines, I create some boundaries, I get done the most prioritized things I need to do, and I'm working the 8 or 9 hours or whatever. Maybe one day I choose 6 hours, but then I'm spending time with my wife. I'm spending time with my kids. I take the time to do a little bit of a workout. I take the time to maybe work on a little project, to read the book that I'm wanting to read. Man, those little things make such a big difference with our balance of our life. And all I can say to help that is you got to be disciplined. You have to be willing to draw a boundary and say, I'm going to stop right now and take this time for me to do something that's going to help balance me out. Because I'm telling you, if you're not balanced, everything we're talking about almost becomes impossible, and it becomes miserable trying to become healthy when we're not balanced in our mind, in our heart, and in our life. So we have to work on being balanced. That's the foundational piece of that, Drew.
Yeah, when we talk about balance, guys, balance is difficult, and we get that. And especially for a lot of us, a lot of you guys are working good water filtration system. We'll talk about that another time, guys, on specific like products and supplements and things like that. We can maybe, Chris and I talk about putting together this kind of higher level health class. We can maybe get into some different things. But the key to balance is to understand that it's okay to not be perfect, but some action and the discipline to that action is the essential part. And it's what I've talked about before. It's kind of the ability to deal with the day-to-day monotony of life is one of those underappreciated superpowers. Being able to put in place, we've talked about savers with the Miracle Morning, or, it's your time for silence or exercise, your water intake, sitting down and meditating, all of these elements, time with family. You search out what you can to help you balance enough as you go through the process that will allow you to bring more balance into your life. Assuming that you're going to transition from, a 40-hour, a 60-hour, an 80-hour, sometimes a 100-hour work week to balance is an exercise in frustration, because that's all you're going to get. And it's going to upset you even more and put you further back, because then it adds stress to what you're doing and it frustrates your expectations. And then you get more upset. And then all of the pieces that have attributed to life being a little out of balance hit you harder. So you have to be patient with yourself during that process. The key is trying to implement some of these things a little bit each and every day. Maybe you add one thing a week, right? Like, I'm going to increase my water for a little bit. If you're not someone that takes vitamins and supplements, trying to go out and get your daily vitamins, vitamin B, enzymes, probiotics, iron, all of these things, and then sitting down and like you look down at one point and you've got all these pile of pills you're taking every day. You go, what the heck's going on? And you're trying to exercise and you're like, honey, wait a minute. I've got to meditate before we come talk because Chris and Andrew said I have to do that. That can become a hassle. You've got to be patient with yourselves, guys. And that's one of the biggest things. When we talk about balance, your health is affected and your business is affected by all of these other things. Right? And that's the key. So what do you only have 3? So we talked about oxygenation. We talked about enzymes, nutrients, balance. There's one more, but I wanted to make sure that we hit this because it's understanding that, guys, the balance is important, but the process and your effort to get there sometimes is just as important as actually achieving it, right? And that you can achieve it over time, but, or the belief like we're talking about with the big leap that you're capable of it and you deserve it.
So balance is number 5? Which is number 5?
Yeah, so guys, we didn't have enough time to go over all the different ones. So we had oxygen as the first pillar, nutrients is the second pillar. We went into enzymes, but then detoxing the body, we didn't talk a lot about detoxing the body. And then the last was actually we talked about probiotics. And the foundational piece under all that is balance. So there's these 5 pillars of health, and then we have to learn balance over them. So we didn't get a chance to kind of touch on the other 2.
Trying to create some excitement, so maybe I could drag Chris back on here another time, and we can.
Andrew, you think I can make a point? Andrew, you think I can make a quick point? So a lot of what it's Ray.
Ray, okay, go ahead.
Quick point, Chris. Thank you for all the information. That's phenomenal. And a lot of you saying about the oxygen part of it saved my life because I suffered from autoimmune disease all my life. And I've been taking, I'm still on low doses of peroxide, food gradable peroxide, low dosages, obviously, to maintain the oxygen levels of my body. And for me personally, with taking other supplements has actually saved my life. So the oxygen part, you're right, dead on that increased the cellular levels of my body.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and Dr. Jim, an ER doctor earlier chimed in. There's elements to health, guys, that all of these things overlap everything in our life. You can't, when we talk about mindset and you talk about your skills in marketing and you talk about the food that you eat and you talk about that walk or the treadmill or the weight that you're lifting or whatever it is, all of these elements play together to create you and your human experience here on this earth, right? And whether you're looking at God or the universe or something else, you've got to understand that there is a purpose behind all of these elements. And we're here now to create the best version of ourself that we can achieve. And yeah, like Cheryl's talking about, health is wealth, right?
Hey, Andrew, quick question for Chris. Chris, hi, Paul here. Hey, where can I follow you? Do you have any social media anything out there I can follow you?
Yeah,
there's great information, by the way.
There's a couple of things. So Drew is probably going to send out some information. So I'll just kind of, put that back on Drew, where he was going to send out some detail if you're wanting to get a little bit more information. Or I know Drew.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you guys are wanting more, you can reach out. Chris and I'll we've been talking about putting something together because I've been working on kind of a personal development course. And I've talked a lot with Chris about adding in the physical side to that. So we've talked about putting something together. But you guys also know that I'm not here trying to sell you more info. Chris isn't, and I'll give him a hard time about this. He's not as active on social media as he could be, as much as this knowledge is that he could share. But with that said, Chris is also working on a project that's, Chris is connected to, I've mentioned a lot of times, guys, I've mentioned my buddy Jason, and how he was one of my first mentors when it came to working online. And he's the guy who recommended the Big Leap. I met Jason through Chris. And I know they're good friends. And, even though they spend more time together, I'd like to say that I was there first as a friend. However, Jason may say.
You'll always be my first there, Drew.
Okay, there we go.
Hey, then maybe you're not contributing enough time into with them.
We'll get Chris. I need to contribute more to the friendship. Absolutely. But, I want to take a couple minutes. Chris has been working a lot with, a FAM project, which is a project that Jason, and I've mentioned it. No, Jeannie, it's not jealous because Jason's a dear friend as well. We're just all playing. Chris, take a minute. Tell me about the FAM project and what you guys are doing and why it's so important.
So this was a big shift. So, I've done a lot of things in the entrepreneur space outside of health and fitness, and I've had a lot of different businesses. So about 2 years ago, I actually had an events business where we did these huge community events throughout all of Arizona. I sold that business and I partnered with Jason, what Drew's talking about, to start this company called the FAM Project. And so this was a little bit of shift in what I was doing at the time. But the FAM Project is trying to solve the problem where we're trying to help families have tools and resources to improve marital relationships, parental relationships, improve family finance, improve everything family. So you think about if you're having trouble with your family, it's like, where do you go? If you're having trouble with your teen, with your 3-year-old, with social media, and how do you manage those devices with your kids? And I'm struggling with my spouse or whatever the case is, my partner. There's not like a one place to go to get information. We can Google on, try to figure out where to go for this, where to go for that. So the FAM Project is trying to create a one-stop shop for families to go to get information. So we've created 2 separate apps. So we've created 2 apps. One is creating opportunities for families to go spend time together. It's called the Fam Fun Pass, and it's activities for families to go spend time together. And the other is Fam Central, which is an educational platform. It's all these resources about how do you better talk to your partner when, through conflict, and how do you manage your kids' social media and their cell phone device and all these different things. So that's the project that we've been working on, is trying to create more tools and resources for our families so that our families can live happier, healthier lives as well. And so that's what the FAM Project is all about.
Yeah. So it's something that Chris and Jason are both incredibly passionate about. They've talked to a lot of people about it. There's, if you want some information, hit me up. I'm not trying to, again, you guys know I'm not trying to sell anything else, but yeah, the FAM Project, what's the website, Chris, if they want to take a look?
Thefamproject.com.
Thefamproject.com. Okay. Yeah, so you can check out their information there. It's one that they've been working on. They're going to continue to develop. There's a lot of stuff. There's going to be more and more all the time. But, families are important for all of us, no matter where we're at in life. Whether it's a significant other, it's parents, it's kids, helping family. All of you guys are here to do more than just achieve something for yourself. And so if you can leave a legacy that'll help families and help communities, then that's what it's really all about. So if you go to famproject.com, you can look at everything, but it's just, that's all it is, right, Chris? Famproject.com.
Yeah. You can get connected to the apps at thefamproject.com.
All right. So we're going to wrap up, but does Chris, do you have, it's The Fam Project, right?
Yeah. Thefamproject.com.
That's what I was going to ask you. So it's the. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chris, any last words for everybody before I wrap this up?
No, guys, I would just, thank you so much for, having some ears, for letting me to speak a little bit. I'm passionate about this. I do want to just end on, I know sometimes these things can be overwhelming. It can be challenging. But here's what I know is when we're willing to make some pivots as people, as entrepreneurs, man, life just gets better. We're able to do a little bit more. We have more energy. We're happier. We're healthier. And so it's worth trying to really take the time to say, hey, I got to make some pivots. Write those pivots down. Just don't say I want to do them. Write them down. Say, I'm going to start by drinking more water today. I'm going to start by eating a little bit more variety of foods today. Hey, I'm going to go start maybe looking at a supplement. Just choose one or two things, write them down, make those small pivots, and they can make the world of difference in our life as a whole, particularly with the stress and the demands and the grind we go through as entrepreneurs. Man, when we're healthier, it makes things so much better. So, guys, I wish you the best in hopefully a good, healthy life and what you're doing, and looking forward to potentially being on here maybe again some other time and sharing some more information. But thanks for having me, Drew. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Guys, this is something, Chris, like I said, Chris and I have known each other since we're 15, 16 years old. We, I don't know how many different track meets we ran together, how many different times we were at the gym together, group dates that we were on, long, late conversations. When I was getting ready to go to Brazil, Chris was prepping himself for, a similar experience here in the States. When we got back, that friendship was one of the first things we rekindled. And even separate, when I first moved out here, he was the guy that was with me. When I found out about my dad, he was the one that, I was in Utah. And when I talk about I was 21 when my dad passed away. When I found out about that, Chris was the one that I called, and he said, hey, you need to call home. Like that's how long we've known each other and how much we've been in each other's lives throughout all of this, process. And health has become important for all sorts of different reasons, being an entrepreneur and lifting and growing and all of these things. So I'm grateful that he was able to come here, share with you guys some of the insights, some of the things that he has learned. Some of the things that have been beneficial for him and hundreds of others that he has taught. It's some things that helped change my life, like reset my trajectory with health after a lot of the stuff that I went through years ago. And it was essential for that. So hopefully you guys got some value out of that and you're able to apply something, guys. If you can't consume all the information, do something today to make yourself better, make yourself healthier so that you can enjoy this journey as an entrepreneur just a little bit more. And as always, no matter what's going on, find a way to rise up from the ashes, fly like the phoenixes that you are, and join us tomorrow. I will be back tomorrow noon. We'll chat about things. If you guys have questions, hit me up. But Chris, I appreciate you being on, my brother. Love you, my man.
Yeah. Thanks, man.